Hello everybody and welcome back. As always, I am Mateo311 and this is your channel for everything VR related. Today we're discussing a massive new development in the VR industry, going over the mixed opinions I've seen regarding it, and diving a little bit deeper into its overall potential. Now I'm sure you're curious as to what I'm actually describing, and that's Flat2VR becoming an official studio and bringing some amazing new ports to VR. Now there are of course links and timestamps if you want to skip ahead, but let's just start this video off with a brief history of Flat2VR. Ever since VR officially released, people have been begging to re-experience certain flat screen games from a VR perspective. Lucky enough for us, the internet is filled with tons of talented developers, and many people have come forward to make this possible. Most notably, we have groups like Team Beef, who've done an amazing job of porting classic titles like Half-Life and Doom 3. Now this grew to the point that the desire of porting games became bigger and bigger, and finally the Flat2VR community was formed, which had the sole purpose of bringing both developers and gamers looking for these amazing ports together. Their Discord became a repository for links, updates, and just plenty of additional information. Now one of the most interesting comments that I've heard throughout the years is that if modders managed to push out so many amazing ports, why are AAA studios failing to do it properly, or why don't we see more and more Flat2VR mods? Now that topic itself actually goes quite deep, and I could probably make a whole nother video there, so I won't spend much time on it, but just know that it's multifaceted and includes things like developers not wanting to take on any risk, having little interest or no knowledge about VR, or it's just much more financially sound for a studio to spend time in other directions. So let's circle back to where we are right now. The fact that Flat2VR is now becoming an official studio, working with the original publishers or developers of a game, and are planning to bring official ports to multiple VR platforms. If you didn't watch the recent VR gaming showcase, I'm going to recap the 4 games that they've recently announced. First up is the Quake-inspired boomer shooter, Aeon: Wrath of Ruin. This game actually utilizes the same engine that the original Quake does, and we know that ports to VR quite well. Now if you enjoy boomer shooters, the biggest upside here is the fact that this is a brand new game, so it definitely has some great enhancements compared to the original Quake titles. And since flat screen titles usually have a bigger budget than VR games, we'll get a lot more bang for our buck here. Now a Medieval, a similar style game, was ported to VR not too long ago, and that did surprisingly well, so I have high hopes for Wrath: Aeon of Ruin. Now next up we got the racing title Flat Out, and I gotta say this looks absolutely fantastic. I'm not much for a racing game fan, but this looks action-packed, and the MetaQuest can definitely use a good racing title. I'm really curious how they're gonna pull this one off, and how that graphical fidelity looks so damn high, so I can't wait to check this one out. Now next up we have a roguelite shooter that I've already personally wished was in VR. Released only a year ago for PC, this game features some awesome cartoon style graphics, is fully playable in co-op, and is currently listed as overwhelmingly positive on Steam. Now I recently covered Big Shots VR, a similar style game that I thoroughly enjoyed, but honestly I think RoboQuest will put that title to shame. And last up we have another overwhelmingly positive game on Steam, Trombone Champ. Now honestly I don't care too much about this game at all, but people do seem to enjoy it, and it's almost like one of those Guitar Hero style games, just a bit quirkier. So this might actually translate really well into VR, and like I said, people currently enjoy the game, so who knows, this can actually be a pretty kick-ass title. But that right there is the perfect segue into the next topic, the overall reaction to the current game announcements. Now I was actually surprised that I saw more negative comments than positive, because I thought this was a pretty solid initial lineup. I understand people want them to come out of the gates with something like God of War or Red Dead Redemption 2, but we need to be realistic here. Big studios are not going to give their IP away to some brand new unknown company. Honestly, this is like their trial run. Flat2VR has to nail these games, prove to the industry that they know what they're doing, and then we will start seeing some bigger and better titles. I know they are currently in discussion with some very big name games, but a lot of the future will depend on how they pull off these next 4 titles. So that brings us to today. I'm currently in Germany about to go to Gamescom, and Flat2VR Studios is about to show off what they're working on to a lot of people. And I'm not just talking consumers, as the vast majority of Gamescom is actually only for business insiders. So this right here could be the initial catalyst for us to see some amazing new titles come to VR. Now in a few days, I'll definitely be giving you my overall opinion, like how well were these games actually ported to VR, and do they actually make for good VR titles. But the most important factor is just Flat2VR proving themselves, which will open the doorway to bigger studios, and of course a lot more money to play with. Now I think we can all agree that there are already some amazing Flat2VR mods out there. Personally, I really liked Deep Rock Galactic, All of the Half-Life mods were absolutely amazing, and right now this is the moment where you drop down in the comments and let me know what your favorite Flat2VR mod was. The point is, we all know there's a ton of potential here, so my fingers are crossed right now, hoping that Flat2VR is going to have an amazing showing. Now if you're currently a non-believer in Flat2VR mods, it's most likely because of a couple different reasons. It's rare that a flat game feels absolutely perfect in VR, because after all, it wasn't made for it. Modders are just generally forcing the whole process to work, and that was my biggest issue with the UE-VR, as even in the best cases, there's still some junk and additional headaches to deal with. Now this whole new Flat2VR as a studio makes the entire process completely different. They're now getting access to the source code, working directly with the original developers, so the likelihood of jank or other unnecessary hurdles will be completely removed. This is absolutely the best case scenario, and honestly much bigger news than UE-VR ever was or will be. Now I'm curious to your feelings in general. Did you think the 4 games that they announced were a good lineup? What are your overall expectations for the future of Flat2VR? What game do you want to see ported above all else? And basically just anything else you have to say about Flat2VR. And that was today's video, a little bit shorter than normal, guys. I am, after all, on the road, doing this in between demos, so I do hope you appreciate that. Now if you enjoyed this, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you're new here, consider subscribing, and as always, I'll see you guys on next time.